Your media, where you are.
Please be patient. We are finding the jingle. Okay, well, welcome to Totally Not Taboo. Today, um, we are talking to Suskia. Suskia Strafella is our guest today on Totally Not Taboo. This is where we talk about everything about sex and sexuality that most people would consider taboo. Suskia is, she is, I don't even know how to describe her, but she will describe herself. She works with wild women and wild woman tantra and womb work. So without any further ado, I just ask my audience to keep an open mind and to whatever you hear, please just be curious as I am, to hear more about what we're talking. So, Saskia, welcome to Totally Not Taboo. Please, would you introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit more about you?
Thank you, Tracy. So honored to be on your show. My name is Saskia, and I run a practice which is called Wild Woman Tantra and Womb Work. And I am a traditional Tantra practitioner and a womb worker, which means that I follow the lineage of womb theology, which teaches women how to connect to their menstruation consciously and how to connect to the essence of their womb spaces through understanding that women, we are cyclical nature. We have a cyclical nature and we must honor that nature. And I also work with traditional Tantra along the lineage of the Kaula tradition, which originated as Kashmiri Shaivism, a part of India. And it also teaches you about the nature of consciousness and the nature of our reality, which is a very basic explanation. It is an extremely vast philosophy, a very transcendent yoga, which is a total catalyst for human transformation and self-realization.
Wow. That is quite a mouthful. And we're going to pick it apart.
Yes.
As we go along so that I can understand more and so can our listeners. Yeah. So your bio is very beautiful and extensive. And what I love about you from the outset is your energy. It's so calming. And you've traveled quite a distance to get to the place that you're at now. For those who wish to read more about your bio, they can find you at just say it for me properly.
I am wildwoman.coza.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading your bio. And what I also loved is learning about you, who I am. Your writing is poetic, really, really beautiful. And so before we get to that, I'd like to know about your workshops, about womb yoga. And before we get to the womb yoga itself, can you tell me about wombology. Do you pronounce it wombology or wombology?
Wombology or womb theology,
Okay.
which is a very ancient teaching. It's very tantric in its essence. And it's a teaching where women used to come together for centuries at a time, just before the patriarchy, actually, and during the patriarchy in secret, where women used to come together under what was known as the red tent, where women would come and bleed together and share stories when they are bleeding. Because when we are bleeding, womb theology says that we are at our most imbalance when it comes to our polarities of masculine and feminine within the body and within the brain. And so when a woman is in tune with her bleed cycle, she becomes almost shamanic in a way, whereas the veils of illusion are lifted and we see beyond illusion. And this is only if we are deeply aware of ourselves, of our body, and of our bleed cycle, if we really honor our body during our bleed cycle. And so womb yoga helps women into this space within their bodies, within their cycle. Womb yoga is designed to balance your cycle, all 4 phases of the cycle, of the menstrual cycle. I created womb yoga because I feel like our education system doesn't teach young women about the truth of our period, about the truth of the womb, how it functions. And then if we're going into Eastern tradition, the power of the womb, the power of the bleed. So the womb yoga is a mixture of womb theology, which is this ancient tradition, and traditional tantra, which is what I've studied along the Kaula tradition. And I've merged these 2 teachings, which are actually very similar at their core. And they come together for this womb yoga. And it helps women connect to the essence of their body.
May I just ask you, koala,
Kaula.
kaula, can you
Yes.
explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in Tantra, there are many different pathways and sects that came from Kashmiri Shaivism. Kashmir is a part of India, and
Right.
Shaivism is a tradition that came from Kashmir, so Kashmiri
Right.
Shaivism. And one of the traditions that I've been trained and that I've just so fallen deeply in love with, that I merge with, that I really feel one with, is Kaula. And it's a tradition where we realize that the union of Shakti and Shiva is ultimate consciousness. And that comes from the heart space. So in the Kaula tradition, we teach a lot about the heart. We believe that the heart is the essence of reality. And so this teaching is so profound because it teaches you about the essence of reality and the nature of yourself as a human being. So it really poses the question, who am I? Who am I in this reality? And who would I like to be? And we merge from that place, and that's a place of heart. And this is why we work with desires, and this is why we work with sexuality, because it's not anything that we're denying, and we're not negating anything, especially our sexuality. Because sexuality is the essence of being a human. It's the expression of consciousness.
Right. Now, I love that. And I've had my own training in tantra and consciousness, sexuality, and so on. So for me, that is the pinnacle. That is the foundation of all that we are, right? The consciousness that we bring into practicing. I can't really say practicing. You said it absolutely beautifully, is that our sexuality, when we become conscious in our sexuality, that's when we become real in our practice of sexuality.
Yeah.
And we are, as we are in our sexuality, that is our essence.
Yes. Yes,
We
your sexuality is
creativity.
an expression. It's an expression of consciousness. It's an
Exactly.
experience. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to feel guilty about. You came from sexuality. And if you look at nature, nature is continuously in sexual act. Nature is continuously making love to reproduce and create more life. This is the nature of the entire cosmos.
Exactly. And the truth of is that when you are alive in your sexuality, you are creative. If your
Yes.
sexuality is dead or not alive, you are not in creativity.
Yes, and the tantric tradition says that there is no such thing as disease, that the body manifests pain and illness and disease as a disconnection from essence, which is sexual life force, which is sexuality. So if you feel that you repress your sexuality in any way and you push it down, or there's a shame that maybe resides in your body, what happens is that the body manifests it as a perversion or an illness or a disease. So we don't even believe in
Right.
disease. We find that if there is no pranic life force moving through the body, it's just a constriction of energy that doesn't know where to go. It cannot flow. And as you said so beautifully, if there's no aliveness in the body, then there's a constriction of energy, and that's where illness comes from. That's where pain comes from.
And I see it so much with my clients who come to me, the majority come to me with sexless marriages. And if we go really, really deep into the reason that there is no sex within the relationship, so much of it is buried in trauma, childhood trauma, and so on. And once we release the trauma, childhood trauma, depression, addiction, and so on, then they can actually connect to their sexuality.
Yes.
And that aliveness and joy can start to be born again.
Yes.
They can start to connect on an intimate level.
Yes, exactly that. And that intimacy, it begins with self always.
Absolutely. So we actually have to find that sexual energy within ourselves as individuals and rebirth it.
In a way,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really finding, because we're Tantra, we don't believe in seeking anything that which we do not already have. You already are it. You are already the entire universe. And so your body is cosmic intelligence. The body has intelligence far beyond the mind's intellectual understanding. And this is why Tantra is such a physical experience. It's a heart experience, because to experience the self really is consciousness experiencing itself. And so that intimacy comes from already, it's just a revealing of what's already inside of you. So, how to strip away the layers of maybe trauma, as you say, or pain, anything that perhaps is residing in the subconscious mind. And this is where womb yoga is so potent for women, because the womb is the dark center of a woman's subconscious mind, which means that there is so much ancestral pain, trauma, shame, baggage, sexual trauma, whatever it is, and it's held within the layers of the womb. And that's the subconscious mind. And so that's why a lot of women struggle with luteal phase specifically before they bleed, which is known as also PMS, premenstrual syndrome. And we have these really intense symptoms because we are so disconnected from the truth of our reality and the truth of our purpose. And we keep pushing it down and pushing it down, and we don't want to hear what the body and what the cycle is asking of us. And so this is the disconnection from self. That is where the disconnect from intimacy happens.
So tell me more about the actual womb yoga. Is it movement? Is it chanting? Is it, tell me more what a practical.
It's everything. The
Uh-huh.
way that I have created this yoga is it's movement based. It's a lot of breath. So we're cycling the breath. We're using a lot of breath to cycle down and channel into the womb space, specifically the lower chakras. So the root and the sacral chakra are very important. The root chakra is right in the cervix of a woman. The sacral chakra is within the womb space. So these are energetic spaces. So I say this is for all women who are currently bleeding, women who are in menopause, girls who have just started their periods or who haven't even started their periods yet, for mothers who maybe have had their wombs removed. It doesn't really matter what your physical structure is. You have the energetic space within you to contain this energy, this creative life force, and that's what we're working with. So we're working with prana, a lot of breath
What is
work.
prana?
Prana is life force or breath. It's the breath. So we're really working with prana and life force, moving it through the body, moving it through the womb space. We do womb meditations, very, very deep meditation where we can go into a yoga nidra, which is very deep meditation. It's a yoga that's between wakefulness and dream space, where your subconscious mind is its most active. The body is super relaxed, and you can just drop into the womb and do a deep meditation and really feel what is happening inside your womb. And we do some movement as well. We do a lot of contractions, although I only recommend contracting the womb during 3 phases of the cycle, not when you're bleeding. I believe that the bleed itself is already the practice. When a woman is bleeding, she is already embodied and she is already meditating. So long as you are aware of your bleed and with it, really be with it when you bleed.
Talk to me about embodiment and ancestral healing.
Yeah. So I'll first go to ancestral healing. In the womb theology teaching, we understand that women are connected through each other's womb spaces. For example, you would be connected to your ancestors through your womb, your mother's womb, your grandmother's womb, your great-grandmother's womb. And there is a lineage that is passed down to each woman through this space, through your womb space. And so often what happens is that when your mother was pregnant with you, she had her stories, she had her pain, she had her trauma. Maybe she didn't eat very well, or maybe she did. She had her mind and her thoughts and everything happening. Her consciousness was given to you through her womb as you grew in her womb. And so the first few years of your life, you in essence are very much tied to your mother. And it's important that as we continue along our life, we undo these ties, because often the stories that we hold in our bodies are not ours. They're our mothers, they're our grandmothers. And you can see this if you look at the women in your family. What are you carrying that all the women in your family are carrying? It could be a food disorder, it could be guilt, it could be shame, it could be money issues, it could be relationship issues, attracting abusive partners. There's so much. And so we look at, that's what ancestral mapping is, or ancestral ties. And so to work with the womb and come back home to your own womb is to come back home to your own essence and to your own reality, and to cut the ties of all the women in your life, which is, it's intense, and especially in the beginning, it can be really intense. It can feel very scary, very, very lonely, especially when you start on the journey. But your body is, as I said, highly intelligent. And so you find your way and you really meet yourself when you enter womb yoga.
Wow.
And then embodiment, that's what embodiment is to really embody your true nature. So who are you beyond the stories and the content of the subconscious mind? Who are you beyond the illusions? In Tantra, we call this Maya. That's illusion. Who are you behind all those illusions that society has put onto you, that perhaps social media has put onto you, that your school has taught you? So when we unlearn all of these things, we begin to connect to the essence of who we really are. And that's where the magic happens. That's where the power is.
So tell me more about tantra as you understand. Well, I'm getting a sort of sense of tantra as you teach it in this sense, because I think of tantra as hands-on healing and working, touching with the body, and yoni and lingam work. And so can you give me more of an understanding of that?
Yeah, of course. There is a lot of misinformation when it comes to the traditional tantric lineage. So when we talk about traditional tantra, meaning coming from the Kahula tradition, Kashmiri Shaivism, the tradition itself is all of it. It's a non-dual teaching that teaches you about the essence of your life, and that doesn't exclude or deny or negate sexuality, but it doesn't only work with sexuality. And there are many other traditions that have come from this specific lineage and have branched out into their own pathways, such as Neo-Tantra, which in my understanding, which in my understanding is very sexual based. That's, for me, that's conscious sexuality. I'm not entirely sure what their rituals are and what they do. I've never really been drawn to it. But in traditional Tantra, what we do is we are really learning how to meditate our entire lives. Your life becomes the meditation. You are connecting to your heart space, and you are learning to fall in love with yourself again, to fall in love with your reality, to become so intimate with your reality that you are making love to your reality every moment of every day. And that's far beyond genital stimulation or the armoring of the genital. It's all encompassing, and it's so vast.
So give me an example of falling in love with your energy every minute of every day.
Yeah.
Of yourself. I mean, yeah, from your perspective.
Yeah, from my experience. I can only really speak from my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me speak about my journey a little bit, just so it can make sense.
Yes.
I've always been a woman that questions the nature of my existence. I've always questioned everything. It drove my parents insane. It drove bosses who I did work for insane. I never settled on what I was just told. I found there was always more. I needed more. I needed to understand more. I questioned everything. And so this is the basis of traditional tantric teaching, is that the question must be there, the inquiry must be there, the desire for life must be there. And so that's where it comes from, is that the heart remembers the texture of love through the teaching. Meaning, this teaching cannot be understood by the mind alone. This is why for the first few months, maybe even years, like my training was a few years before I actually touched any texts, where you are moving and dancing and meditating your body. Everything is an oral transmission from teacher to student, from master to student, meaning you don't read anything. You are opening the body. The body is recognizing and remembering the teaching as an expression of love. It's divine love. It's God meeting God, essentially. And you remember that texture. You hear your teacher say something, and your whole body just opens, and you remember it. And so this is what making love to your reality feels like, when your heart is pierced and you remember it as something that you recognize, that you know exists, that you know is real for you. And then you can go on to learning the actual texts and reading the books. Because then it makes sense, because now the body is open, the body is expanding. And so now your intellectual mind can now also understand.
I remember being at a retreat once when we did so much Shakti movement, and I remember connecting with this heart source through movement, and it's almost like you do connect to that primal source,
Yeah.
that your body just knows where to go. Your body knows how to move, the sounds you make. It's instinctual. And it's crazy because it's something, it feels like home. So I get exactly what you're saying. And that, for me, resonates with the wild woman.
Thank
It really
you.
does. Yeah, I love that. So we need to take a little ad break. And while we are talking about bodies, we all know that summer bodies are built in winter, but that can be easier said than done. So why not join fitness expert Mo on the Health Fix with Mo for an inspirational weekly fitness podcast show for fitness novices. Mo chats to the best in local health and fitness experts in an effort to get information to help you achieve your aesthetic, fitness, and health goals. Subscribe on YouTube, listen on any good podcast platform, or find it on www.yourmedia.co.za, your media, hashtag where you are. So back to Saskia. I don't think I'm really finished with the womb yoga, but for now, I'm really interested in the men's gatherings as well as the women's gatherings. And I know I keep saying this, but these thoughts are running through my head. For some who view this work as a little bit woohoo and a little bit taboo, which is why we're talking on Totally Not Taboo, tell me why it can be seen as woohoo or taboo.
I actually love that question so much because woohoo means something that is mystical, right? Something that is maybe magical.
Yes.
And I think that's what people refer to something being woohoo when it cannot be understood with the intellectual mind, with the logical, linear thinking brain, which is the way we're being taught to exist in our society, especially as Western women or Western man. Nothing wrong with it. However, the body is a temple and it's an expression of consciousness. The body is to be used, it's to be moved. And so the body understands that this work is extremely mystical. Yes, it is extremely mystical and magical. And what happens is that you get to experience the essence of yourself through just your body. You're not transcending. We're not meditating to a point where we are wanting to be enlightened, where we are wanting to transcend or change. Tantra says, no, we're not here to change anything or transmute, not even transmute. All we are doing is creating such a deep awareness for what already exists here in the now. And through being so aware in the body, what happens is your body begins to spontaneously arise. Things, sensations, thoughts, memories, feelings start to arise. And when you are so aware in the body, intuitively aware, intrinsically aware, what happens is that this becomes the expression of consciousness. You are moving with the entire cosmos. This is what the teaching is saying. And for me, that can't be woohoo. It feels so perfect for me in my experience. I have tried many different things. I've done many different things. I've experimented with ayahuasca and different plant medicines. I've traveled across the world for my teachers. I've done vipassanas. I've done hypnoses, past life regressions. I've experienced a lot with my body. And when I look back, everything was pushing me into traditional tantric work. This teaching is the core of existence, and it is hard to understand with the mind. So I can imagine, there's lots of thoughts and questions arising, not really understanding what the truth of it is. Some people might be thinking it is woohoo, it's too much to really comprehend, and it's because it is. What I'm asking you to do is just to experience it. Come and experience it. Experience yourself. Because when you experience yourself, you can feel that is not woohoo. It's just mystical, it's real. To be with yourself in a total empty space, that's reality. I think we're so used to having a mind that is so full of thoughts and pain and trauma and thinking and overthinking and overanalyzing that we forget that our natural state of being is to be totally at ease, is to be space, is to just be empty.
I love that, because it's so difficult, and I do this with my clients at every session. Relaxation exercise, and I challenge them to be in their bodies and to close off the mind, to be an empty vessel, just to breathe. And some manage quite well, and others really, really battle to shut off the mind and to be present in the body, just be conscious. So I love that exercise. It also tells a lot about the client itself, themselves. And I love the way you've said here, the body is the playground for which consciousness wants to experience and express itself.
Yeah. So in the tradition, we say that you are not your body, you are intrinsically more than your body. However, in Tantra, you are also your body, because without your body, you cannot experience the fullness of this expression. Consciousness wants to experience itself, and we don't do that unless we are in the body, experiencing yourself through all of your senses. There are 6 senses, all 5 of your sensory organs, and 6th sense of mystery. And that's what Tantra goes into, is that using all 5 of your senses, we drop into the mystery of life, of reality. And that's where we dance. That's where Tantrika just floats.
Sure. That is one for my little toolbox to add, 6th sense, which is mystery. Love that. So tell me about the men's gatherings, because, yes, there is a lot of focus on women when it comes to Shakti energy. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of energy for women, but I find that men are a lot more in their masculine energy. And we'd like them to be infused with a little bit more feminine energy. So what happens in these men's gatherings?
Exactly the same thing that happens in the women's gatherings, where we are doing the exact same practices. Men are also Shakti. Men are also feminine. You see, we're working with the polarities. And as I said, the Kula tradition believe that it is the realization of the union of Bhairava or Bhairavi, which means Shakti or Shiva, the God consciousness, the polarities of masculine and feminine come together in unity in the heart space. And there is only one heart, and men and women have the same heart. There's not a masculine heart, there's not a feminine heart. So the work is the same. And in my experience, a man has a very linear body. The body functions 24 hours. They can do the same thing today as what they did yesterday, as what they will do tomorrow, and it feels right. It feels good. And I'm just generally speaking. And women are monthly, cyclical. So we work with the seasons, we work with the moon, and we work with our bleed. It's not by mistake that we have 4 phases. We are very cyclical. So the work is the same. We are feeding the same energy with men. Men are also feminine. Men have this powerful feminine nature in them. And what we do with tantric work is that we just help them embody what is already inside of them. We are just revealing also their true nature to themselves. And it's different for every man. Everybody's journey is so unique.
Can we go back to those 4 dimensions of a woman's cycle?
Yes.
So 4 elements?
Yes. So the 4 physical cycles, you have your bleed, the menstruation, follicular phase, ovulation, and luteal. And in each of these phases, which last, different amounts of time for each woman, it's not the same for every woman. And this is what we must understand and accept about our own nature, is that every woman is so different. Your bleed is so different. Every bleed is unique. And in these 4 cycles, each of these phases have a certain type of wisdom. I'd like to call it a wisdom. And if you're honoring your body during each of these phases using breath work, this is the womb work now. So you would use breath work, certain movements, journaling, visualization, meditation techniques to honor those specific cycles, to bring out and enhance each of those wisdoms in each of those cycles. That is what honoring your cycle means. That is what connecting to your essence means. And from that place, you can only succeed. You can only live the fullest life through your bleed. It's through your bleed that we can live the fullest life, the most pleasurable and most blissful life.
So it's your bleed. Well, it's your, if I can just say, premenstrual phase, then it's your bleed. Well, so your premenstrual is your ovulation.
No.
Right.
So the luteal phase is your premenstrual phase.
Right. Then
you bleed. And then you drop into follicular.
What's it? I didn't hear you. Follicular. That's your ovulation?
No, and then it's ovulation.
Sorry, I'm actually in another phase of my life. So, yeah.
It surprises me, or actually, it does not surprise me how many women don't know this about their bodies, because I learned this in maybe grade 11, and then you never learn it again. You never hear about it again. And we pop tampons, or we use, stuff in our bleed, or we use birth control to take away our period and connect us and repress us from our femininity, which also represses our sexuality. And then we forget about it. And then we don't know where we are in our cycle. We don't even know what luteal means. Most women think it's PMS. And they constantly affirm that they're PMSing, which, words and thoughts are consciousness. They manifest. So if you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm PMSing, you are only going to have terrible symptoms every time you bleed. You are going to PMS. You will have premenstrual syndrome. So we must be very careful of the narrative that we continue to use when it comes to our bleed cycle. It's so powerful. Our words are so powerful.
I was going to ask you about contraceptives. And so tell us more.
I love talking about this because it's really important for me to create a huge awareness around contraception, around birth control. First, I want to say that there's nothing wrong. If you are on birth control, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Women don't realize that when we are putting contraception, especially hormonal contraception, into the body, we are really poisoning our body. We are repressing our femininity. We are repressing our sexuality. What happens is that the hormonal contraception represses us in a way that allows us to forget our true nature. And I was on birth control for over 15 years, so I've had it for a long time. I got really sick. I had terrible migraines for a very, very long time, for more than half my life. And, my sexuality, my sexual essence was repressed for the longest time. What happens when you're on hormonal birth control, this is very fascinating, is that your body is in a constant state of pre-pregnancy. And there have been many studies that show that if a woman is in a constant state of pre-pregnancy, she chooses a mate that is perhaps not in alignment to her true nature, because her body responds to a mate that needs to be less aggressive, somebody who will not be threatening to her child that doesn't even exist in the body. So really taking that into
Fascinating.
consideration. There are studies, women can go look at this. This is real. You know, hormonal birth control is very toxic to the body. And what it's doing is that when we say, okay, I'll take this birth control, we are losing responsibility for our body. We are not becoming responsible for the language our body speaks. If we understood what the body does, if we understood what our cycle does and how it works, we wouldn't really need this.
Yeah.
It's about understanding your
Well,
sexuality. When are you fertile? When are you not fertile? What does your body feel like when she's fertile? And so be responsible during that time.
fascinating. So what is being done to educate young women and more mature women about contraception and their femininity?
Well,
Not enough.
not enough, that's for sure. Our education system, in my experience, really needs to change. We really need to teach young girls about the truth of the womb, of our period, the simplicity of it, the complexity of it, the power of it, and not to shame girls. Mothers speak openly to their girls about periods. Fathers speak openly to their girls about periods. Learn about it, educate yourself. It's nothing to be ashamed of. This is the essence. You come from this. You come from the
Yeah.
juice of this nectar. This is where you come from. This is the cosmic
So,
womb.
right. And then we also have to be very sensitive about safe sex.
Yes.
And so the education has to be quite balanced.
Well, the education really should begin with knowing your body, right? So if we know the cycle and we understand what the body does during certain parts of the cycle, for example, when we're ovulating, which is you have a 5 to 6 day window period where you are very fertile and where you can fall pregnant. That's ovulation. The body gives you certain signals as to when you're ovulating. Your cervix excretes a thicker, whiter, more dense fluid, which is very stringy. You can feel that. You can touch that. Your body feels more energized. You feel more sexual. Your temperature increases. So there are certain signs that the body very intelligently shows us, and we are not listening to it. Instead, we are putting stuff in our body that represses those signals. And so we don't know anymore. We're out of touch with our natural processes, with our natural nature, cyclical nature.
That requires, I think, quite a mature mind, and to try and teach young teenagers to be in touch with their body clocks. I suppose it takes a really long time or a deep consciousness that I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure how many young teenagers have the ability, the emotional maturity to grasp these concepts. But I suppose
Yeah.
that's for another talk.
Yeah. No, in my experience, I feel that our young people today are waking up very quickly. Our younger
Very much
generation
so.
is very, very awake. And I have no doubt that if that's where consciousness is meant to move, that it will move there. But I
Yeah.
think having conversations like this is all we can do for now. It creates an awareness. I've created a course as well. I've created many online courses for women to go onto and to receive this education. And, you know, for me personally, it served its place. I had birth control. It served my place. I was very unconscious through many parts of my life. I needed it. It served me. And then I reached a point where I became more aware and I had to unlearn it. And this is where I am now. So really trusting your process and know that there's no shame. Wherever direction you go, there is no shame.
Absolutely. That's what we have to teach. That's also what Totally Not Taboo is about, is really presenting all aspects of sex and sensuality and debunking the myths, that there is no shame about expressing your sexuality in it, whichever way it presents itself. So, Saskia, there is actually so much more I wanted to talk about, for example, the red tent and so on. But we are over time. And you can see when I go over time, I'm really enjoying the topic of discussion. But if people want to know more about you and your practice, they can get you on your website, as we said before. Please just repeat it. I don't want to get it wrong.
It's iamwildwoman.coza.
Exactly. Thank you so, so much for making yourself available today. And I really hope that so many people have learned the value of your beautiful work and the contribution that you make to the universe.
Thank you, Tracy.
And especially to opening people's ideas to consciousness. Because once you do, it is a beautiful journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show.
It's an absolute pleasure. Have a beautiful weekend. And I hope your weather makes up its mind like ours here in Joburg.
Thanks, Tracy.
And all the best. Thank you to our listeners. Join us again next episode here on Totally Not Taboo.